So yeah, here I'm gonna talk about our result that is called Medium, a bridge from Bitcoin to Ghost, that I've done in collaboration with a coworker called Anna Parker and my advisor Christian Cachin. So the first thing is to understand why do we consider something like this. So let's start to introduce what's called as a balance attack. In blockchain, as we all know, we have this set of people that are distributed over the world, that they are running a protocol over the internet. And in this particular attack, what the adversary does is cuts the communication between two big parts of this protocol. So as normal blockchain work, they are just going to fork, and each part they want to build their own tree without knowing the other. This time is really useful for the adversary to mine on both sides or the losing side, because we know that the adversary can control the network and can see both parts at the same time. And the only aim of the adversary is to, after all this time that he's able to cut the communication, to balance basically balance the trees in a way that miners in both parts of the partition think that their chain is the correct one, and they are going to continue mining on that part. And so at the end of this partition, the adversary checks at the global view and releases some blocks to keep this balance. This is a really big problem in general, so we cannot analyze it completely. We're going to look at two particular cases, the case of Bitcoin and the case of Ghost. So what we find is that apparently Bitcoin behaves pretty well, because let's say we partition and we have an execution. It's here, if the adversary does nothing, the nodes, they will agree on the chain on the right, the long chain. So the adversary has to release this particular block. There's no other block that the adversary can mine to compensate the chains at the end. However, if we look at the case of Ghost on the other side with the same execution, the adversary could release a block here, or on this other side, or this other side, or this different one, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this one, maybe this one. So the adversary has a huge ability to be more lucky mining, because to release the last one has to be mined on top of the last block, so it's a shortened window of time. So as long as at the end the number of blocks on each side of the fork is the same, the adversary is able to balance, and the nodes are not going to be, and they will continue forking for a really long time. So one may think, wow, Bitcoin behaves great, why do we need something else? The question is that it doesn't behave that nicely, because we can have a different execution with something like this. The trees, they clearly look different to our eyes. However, according to the Bitcoin protocol, the two chains that we see over there, they are equally long, so they are equivalent. Or we can go even to a worse scenario, where it's clear that on one side of the tree there is more hashing power that was spent with high probability because of the bigger number of blocks. Anyways, according to the protocol, both are the same. So basically, the only condition is that the trees, if both are equally deep, there's nothing we can do. So let's see, what can we do? We can take these ingredients, try to mix them to create a new way of another protocol that maybe can do better than this both under the balance attack. So the idea for this protocol is the blocks, they are on some level. So the block in the first level, we assign it weight C. The blocks that are one deeper on the second level, C squared, on the third level, C cubed, in the level I, C to the I. And we need to define the new chain selection rule. We follow the same approach as Ghost, that we start in Genesis, and among our children, we select the heaviest block. However, what we change here is the definition of heaviest. So we define the weight of a block as the sum of the weights of its descendants, including itself. So what we are going to do is we start in Genesis. In this case, we see the two blocks. The right one has this weight, if I computed it right. The left one has this different weight. And we continue once, let's say, for example, that the right one is the heaviest one. Then we look at the children of the right one, and we continue until we get to the leaves. So the idea is here, the adversary may try to balance the chain as we were discussing before. But in this case, balance, what the adversary has to do is to say, okay, this is the difference in weight. So this is clearly dependent of the constant that we define that I haven't explained so far. So it's possible that if we take a clever constant, this is really hard to balance. If we take a bad constant, this is pretty bad and really easy to balance, maybe to the level of ghost. So let's see a bit of how to pick a constant. Well, if we take constant number 1, is basically we just need to count the number of blocks. All the blocks are the same because 1 to the 7 is the same as 1. So 1 is a bad idea. Let's think about 2. 2 is also a bad idea because basically we were looking at the difference of weights. This is a polynomial. So 2 is a root of the polynomial, for example, x minus 2, or several other polynomials that we can find where 2 is a root. So it's really easy to balance. With the same argument, we see that 1/2 or 700 is an option, 1/2, 3/2, 7/3. However, we can have pi, for example. Pi, we know that is not a root of any polynomial, so it looks like a wonderful idea. However, we need to write it in the computer, and for that we need to use an approximation, so it doesn't look that good after all. 1.31 looks a bit better, but we end up in the same problems as before. Also the same with 2.001. Square root of 2, for example, we have the polynomial x squared minus 2. So from here, the last option that we have is the 5th root of 23. Actually, this is, you can find a polynomial, x to the 5 minus 23, but that's not the idea. The important idea to notice here is that we need to go to a degree 5. So in principle, we could take numbers of this shape, roots of some polynomial, that is x to the n minus 1 prime number. And these ones, they satisfy some properties that we are not going to discuss here for the lack of time. But we guarantee that if we have 2 trees with different weight, and the trees, we assume that they are not the same, then they have to be at least depth. They need to have at least depth n. What this means is like, for those 2 different trees to have a different weight, we needed to have depth n. And n is how deep a tree is. In other words, the time that the adversary needs to keep the partition, we can make it as big as we want by increasing n, because the adversary needs to either perfectly balance the tree, releasing the exact blocks in every position, not only in the last position as in Bitcoin. So with this, we get to what's the best result, that a balanced attack implemented on medium has finite duration with a proper choice of the constant and some conditions on the mining power of the adversary, of course, that I'm not going to discuss here. But the problem is, okay, what if the duration is finite, but it takes 700 years? That's not really useful. So here we can see the result of a simulation that we did with MPQ. Is basically, we divide the protocol in rounds and we let it run. And MPQ is the number of blocks that we expect among adversarial and honest in each of these rounds. So we can see that in both cases, Ghost is the worst protocol of them. In the y-axis, we have the number of rounds that the 4 can be held after this partition that we discussed before, and in the x-axis, the fraction of corrupted parties. So in these cases, we all see that Ghost is the worst case, and medium, the higher the constant, the better it performs. This is something to keep in mind because it may ring a bell later. So yeah, the next problem is like, we are really resilient to the balance attack, or at least it looks like, but maybe our protocol is extremely slow, and after all, it's not really useful. So for that, we did a simulation of the throughput, where we consider a greedy adversary, where its target is simply to kick honest blocks from the main chain, trying to insert these malicious blocks. And we represent the fraction of honest nodes that we get in the chain versus the fraction of corrupted nodes. This, for example, we also plot Ghost and Bitcoin. We see that Ghost, as is known under this kind of attack, is achieving better throughput than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the worst throughput. And we find that medium, for the constants that we select, we are in the middle between Bitcoin and Ghost. For high values, we look like we are similar to Bitcoin in this case. And for low values, we look like similar to Ghost. So yeah, we are not that slow. At least in the worst case, we're like Bitcoin. So now let's check a bit more. How is that possible that we are in the middle? Is it just that I was clever selecting the constants or something else? So for that, let's look at the difference in weight between two blocks in consecutive levels. This, we know that one is c to the I, the other one is c to the I plus 1, so the difference is c, a factor of c. This means that we need c blocks on a level that is a bit less deeper, like one level higher, to compensate one single block in the next level. So if we look at some cases of c, for example, c equal to 1, all the blocks, they have exactly the same weight. So we have ghost. It's literally the same protocol. Explained in a more complex way, but the same protocol. However, if we look at values of the constant that increase to a really high value, what we are saying is that we need an enormous amount of blocks in a previous level to compensate a block in this level. So if we make this constant increase and increase and increase until we approach infinity, what we can see is that, well, we don't really care about the number of blocks. We just care about the deepest chain, or what, in other words, the longest chain. So we can understand Bitcoin as the limit when we increase this constant. But another point that I omitted so far is, okay, so we can see these protocols, particular cases, these ones are considered to be secure, they are fast, but we are secure against the balance attack with this really nice security that we have explained, but maybe we have built this huge framework that will prevent the adversary from breaking our protocol, but we left the backdoor completely open in a way that basically we can have this really nice tolerance against the balance attack or whatever we can think in mind, but we can be vulnerable to a very, very simple attack that ruins our protocol. So for that, we can see that it's not true. I hope that you can see fast, because otherwise you cannot understand this. But we can get a bit of extra help. And it says that we can concentrate in opposing. So what we have is that Medium is a secure consensus protocol, as secure as Bitcoin at Ghost. We also introduce a general framework that allows to understand better Bitcoin at Ghost, how this can be improved, how to fix vulnerabilities of this. And our protocol lies in the medium between Ghost and Bitcoin, being resilient to balance attacks. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ignacio, for this very interesting protocol. We have some time for questions, so the audience can click the Q&A button to type in their questions when they're ready. So let me start with one question. I'm kind of curious, how did you come up with this protocol as you were working on it? Did you try to find a medium balance between Bitcoin and Ghost to create some sort of continuum between the two? Or did you follow a different approach? Like, how was the design decision made here? And how did you figure out this this concept of C to the power of I?
It was a bit of a hybrid approach. It started when I was reading about the balance attack. And then basically I was also reading at the same time about Ghost Act, the paper that was introduced before, that I spent a really hard week on it. And then I saw, the thought was like, okay, maybe we can create a general model that allows to understand Bitcoin and Ghost. This was the idea of my advisor. And then I just said, okay, Bitcoin looks like the more we increase, the better. So I just one day, I think it was in the yin or the shower, I don't remember, I came up with the idea of modeling as some constant. I tried linear, didn't work, and exponential was the idea at the end.
Thank you, thank you. I don't think we have any further questions. So thank you so much again, Ignacio, for this talk.